We're going to begin our service observing the tradition of Kriya. Each of the family members is wearing a black ribbon attached to their either jacket or shirt, and it has been cut and ripped as a sign that someone they love has been ripped away from their life. And Rabbi Hayon will be leading the family in the traditional blessing to be recited. Up here.
Well, friends, it is a full house in here. Looks as though just about every space is taken, just about every seat, and even some spaces where folks are standing as well. And it strikes me that everyone in here, every soul here to pay respects and share love and memory and condolences, each one of us is a different piece of testimony to Ellen's memory, to what she meant to her community, to this city, to her synagogue, and of course to this grieving family who are seated here in front of all of us, and within whom the shock of this loss reverberates the most painfully. All of us are here to grieve. All of us are here to share memories and offer some small measure of comfort to the rest of us who this afternoon are bereaved. So this circle of family sitting in front of us find themselves grieving in a world that is newly darkened. They sit here largely in silence, but in their silence there is lamentation. In their tears there is loneliness, though today they are surrounded by loving family and friends. Though they're lost in their sorrow, we pray that they'll find the presence of a loving community and feel the nearness of you, O God, and that you will remain with them in their grief. So for Ellen's love that united all of us, so many of us here today in life, and which cannot now be severed by death, for her companionship that we shared along life's path, and which continues now through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of her heart and her mind that brought joy and happiness to so many, and which is now among our most precious remembrances. For all these and more, we now give our thanks to God. And so in this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our ancient scriptures that bring us the ever-new message of God's nearness, that speak to us of our kinship with the Creator, in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. We continue with the words of the 23rd Psalm, first in Hebrew and then together in English. Adonai ro'i lo echzar, binoteshe yarbitzeni al me'menochoti nahaleni, nafshi shovev, gamcheni b'ma'agale tzedek lema'an shemo, gam ki elech begetz al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi, shiftecha u'mishantecha hema yenachamuni, ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged zorarai, Dishanta b'shemen roshi kosi revaya, ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. We read together in your handout the words of the psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Continuing with more words from our ancient scriptures, we continue now with these words from the psalmist. I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the protector of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. God is the protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon at night. God will guard you from all harm. God will guard your soul, your going and coming, now and forever. Having heard these words of ancient tradition, the words from wise and ancient pens, we supplement those words now with words from this circle of grief and loss and love and connection. We hear now the words of Ellen's most nearest and dearest mourners on this afternoon. It is a bittersweet pleasure for me to invite Rabbi Walter up to offer his words and also invite those members of this circle of love and concern to share their eulogies as well.
Ellen's granddaughter, Kirby, and then her daughter, Sherry, would like to share some thoughts first. Kirby, you want to come up?
Only for Lily would I attempt this. Okay. There was one sentence that instantly came to mind to begin this exceptionally difficult task describing a woman like my grandmother. Lily, this is very, very important, and I must get a hold of you now because it's just so important. So please, Lily, please just call me back. It's important. I am certain I can speak for all of her grandchildren when I tell you how different it is going to be not having those voicemails from our Lily that accumulated quite rapidly anymore. She always had crucial things she needed to tell us. I am not sure if any of us ever found out what those vital messages concerned, but I do recognize I will miss those voicemails literally more than anything. Lily, I seriously believed you were going to outlive the entire family. I rarely have trouble putting words together, nor am I ever left speechless. However, I now know what that feels like, and of course, you are the only person capable of leaving someone like me, who always has something to say, without words. My initial instinct was to pick up the phone and call you to go over this with you in order to make certain it was good enough for such an amazing, inspiring role model like yourself. You didn't answer, so I made sure to leave a message to let you know I needed you because this is very important. There were so many things our family acknowledged when we got together to discuss you and your unbelievable life. Ryan mentioned something that I wish I would have been more mindful of when you were here with us so I could thank you. He said, Lily was always there. She never missed a family function. As I processed what he was saying, I was able to identify many incredible characteristics you obtained and how dynamic of a woman you have always been. You exemplified the true value and significance of family through your persistent actions. You exhibited what it meant to be a part of one. Ryan was right. You never missed a thing. Regardless of how sick you may have been at the time, you would walk right in with your head held high and your presence was immediately noticed. I feel obligated to note how you never allowed your illnesses to affect your appearance. You continuously looked phenomenal up until the very day you passed. You dressed to impress when you felt your worst and taught me to never let go of myself. You communicated how important presentation truly is. Not only did you guarantee a remarkable existence, you always made the time to talk to everyone at these gatherings. Additionally, you conveyed how important each family member's relationship with you meant to you. We would be with you, yet you still craved more plans to see each of us exclusively because we meant so much to you, and you really cherished the time you spent with us, as did we. You called until you got someone to pick up because you truly desired to know what was going on in each of our lives, and I see that now. You had nothing but our best interest at heart. You should know that each of your grandchildren has a part of you in them, and because of you, we will always have such a strong bond that will never be broken. When concluding our discussion with Rabbi Walter of memories and funny stories, Jeremy looked at me and said, and trying to say goodbye on the phone with her seemed impossible. We shared a laugh, and ironically, I think I know why that was so difficult now. You didn't want to stop talking because we brought you joy, the same enjoyment I'm experiencing this second talking to you. You were never prepared to say goodbye because it was usually a bit of a challenge getting a hold of each of us in our busy lives and didn't know when you were going to get to have the chance to talk again. Well, right now, I don't want to hang up. I also still wonder how some of your voicemails lasted as long as they did, considering when I leave voicemails, the operator always cuts me off. However, you somehow vetoed that, which doesn't surprise me, but seriously, I have no idea how you did that because you left some very long voicemails. I find myself rambling about nothing the same way you did when it was time to hang up the phone. The presence you carried so gracefully is infinite, and I know we will always feel it. But for now, it is time to say goodbye, Lily. You definitely left a significant mark on this world, and you are one amazing woman who is impossible to forget. I am lucky to call you Ellen Ray Penner, my beautiful grandmother. I love you.
Sherry?
How do I begin to recall a woman like my mother? How do I find the words to capture that? How do I begin to describe a woman like none other? Actually, I figured it out in nothing flat. Many a thing I would like to tell her, and many a thing you ought to understand. But how can I make you know the things that rabbis cannot bestow, the things in life she had planned? Oh, how do I begin to recall a woman like my mother? How do I capture something never meant for words? When I was with her, I'd be confused, out of focus, and bemused, but I always knew exactly where I stood. Unpredictable as weather, no one ever thought her flighty as a feather. She was daring, she was lively, and with her behind me, I know I always could. She could outpester any pest, drive a hornet from its nest, and keep even the best of ballerinas on her toes. She was gentle, she was wild, she was a riddle who mystified, but you know for every occasion she had the clothes. She was as generous as she was fine. She could be quite funny after a glass of wine, and I always wondered why a hurricane she was never named. She was smart, she was beautiful, she was kind and oh so gentle. She was a daughter, she was a mother, a Lily, but very much the grande dame. In closing, I'll just say a piece of something that I grew up with hearing every time I left my mother's side from as early as I can remember, and that's, Mom, I love you, a bushel and a peck, a bushel and a peck and a hug around the neck, a barrel and a squeeze, and I'm shaking in my knees without you.
A couple of years after I became senior rabbi, I was walking down the hall at Temple after having just performed the funeral of a very close friend. I was going one way, Rabbi Kahn was coming the other. I stopped and said, Rabbi, you taught me a lot over the past few years, but there's one thing you forgot to tell me. The job gets harder, not easier. That describes today. Ellen Penner was not just a member of Emmanuel, an active member, past president. She was my friend. I knew her well. I knew her in her best of times, and I knew her in her worst of times. In many ways, and she told me this many times, I was important to her. So standing here, talking about her is very personal. I have the family's input, of course, but mostly I have my own stories, personal stories that mark our friendship. First, I'll tell you one of hers, and then I'll tell you one of mine. She was often quick to remind me, in the presence of others, of course, of a time many years ago when she was in the hospital. She had called me and told me she wasn't feeling well. I told her she needed to go to the emergency room. She said, I'm not doing that. After the third phone call about the same issue, she did relent at least enough to call the doctor, who immediately sent her to the emergency room, and they admitted her into the hospital. When I went to see her, I needed to find a way to let her know I had been right. So this is a true story. I kicked open the door to her room, literally, shot her the finger, and without hesitation, she turned to the man on her right and said, Doctor, I'd like you to meet my rabbi. true story. And one of my favorites is the same one that Kirby shared. Roy, it's Ellen. Please call me. I need to talk to you. It's important. Please, please call me. If I had a nickel for every time that message was on my phone at home in the office, I would be a rich man. Of course, when I called back, the conversation was not about something important at all. It was about the same things we had talked about 1,000 times. It took me a while, but I came to realize what she meant by important. She didn't mean I have an important issue to talk to you about. She was saying, it's important to me that I talk to you, that I stay connected to you, that you are important to me. I think all of us know that, in a phrase, Ellen was a force to be reckoned with. She was at the same time one of the neediest people I know, as well as very supportive of my own needs and others, generous even to a fault. She was as insecure in some ways as others, and in some ways more confident than anyone else I know. Sherry captured it well. Ellen broke the mold. But through it all, let me tell you what the foundation of Ellen Penner was. It was love of family and love of community. If we look at her life, those themes emerge as the foundation of her very character. Love of community. The list of her service to this community, especially the Jewish community, is a very long list of accomplishments. Years of fundraising for the Federation, culminating in her being chair of the Women's Division. Her philosophy about fundraising she learned from the most important man in her life, her father. It's okay to ask anybody for any amount of money as long as it's not for yourself. And ask she did, and raised untold amounts of money over the years. She led missions to Israel for the Federation, and during the years the Soviet Jews were struggling, she had a passion for visiting them and helping them out of their circumstances. The welfare of the Jewish people was so important to her. Because of her leadership in so many ways, Ellen came in contact with lots of younger women and served as a role model of community service to them. That made her prouder than I have the words to describe, because occasionally, sometimes often, a young woman would come up to her and tell her she had been her role model. I would get a phone call within hours because she always wanted to share that. It was so important. Her proudest community accomplishment, by her own accounting, was her presidency of Emanu. One of her 2 years was marked by a controversy that created a significant amount of tumult. Ellen calmly steered us through that problem with amazing skill. And when Murray asked her not too long ago, what among all these things that we sitting out here, Mom, are the most important? She pointed to the glass sculpture that has an emblem of the temple, along with her name and years of service as president etched into the glass. Love of family. Her parents. As Ellen's parents aged, they moved to Houston. Ellen took over and saw that they were taken care of in every way possible. I was with her so many times in the hospital during those times. I know how hard it was, but I also know that she never skipped a beat being a good daughter. Because I knew Ellen so well, I know that sometimes, as I said to Murray recently, she could be difficult to love. That's largely because she had such expectations of others, especially her family, and when she was disappointed, she showed it. And I got a lot of phone calls about that disappointment. But I hope all of you know that her expectations were there because she loved you, fully and unconditionally, and expected the best from you. Being with you was hands down the most joyous time in her life. Whether it was going out for dinner on a Sunday night with one of you, or all of you being together for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, or Pesach. She craved that time with you. She needed it. You all were aware without question that you were the foundation of her life, starting with her brother Charles, through her children and her grandchildren. She loved you, and she missed you deeply when you were too busy to spend time with her. But she was obviously happiest when she was with you. I hope Murray and Karen and Howard and Nancy and Sherry won't take this the wrong way, but there are 7 people who trumped you. Jeremy, Josh, Katie, Rachel, Ryan, Brandon, and Kirk. The word Lily, what you called her, was the sweetest word in her vocabulary. A call from you, a visit from you, time spent with any one or all of the 7 of you was the most precious time of all. No matter the subject of any phone call to me, she usually made it a point to include at least one or more of you in that conversation, to say that she loved you and that she was proud of you is barely to open the conversation. I'm guessing there's not a person in this room who doesn't know that a good part of Ellen's adult life was filled with medical issues. I once teased her she had so many surgeries her body must look like a road map. If you know that, then you also know that she never let any of that stop her from living as full a life as possible. She pushed herself beyond limits of both pain and ability, beyond limits that I am able to even imagine and fathom. Especially these last few years when she was so dependent on her caregivers, who are here and whom Ellen and the family are so immensely grateful to. She would put herself together, force herself out of the bed, get dressed and get herself into that contraption that she needed to walk with. Yes, it slowed her down, but only rarely did it prevent her from being someplace she really wanted to be. These last couple of months, however, were different, because it was no longer about bones and joints. It was about organs. And Ellen expressed to me not too long ago that she was scared because she knew her body was beginning to fail. Marie and Howard and Sherry and the family gathered around and saw to it that these last couple of months were as smooth as possible. And the reunion with Nanny Lee, Ellen's friend and housekeeper for decades, that Sherry put together, was filled with tears of sweet joy. Day before yesterday, September the 4th, early in the morning, Ellen did something she never did. She let go. She had held on for years with just her inner determination to keep living. I think she knew what day it was, the date. I think she chose it. It was the date of her father Jaime's death. As I said earlier, he was the most important man in her life, and I think she wanted to share that day with him. When I texted my kids to let them know that Aunt Ellen died, my daughter Michelle wrote back, quote, "I thought she'd live forever." I think many of us had that feeling, despite all the medical issues over the years, that she'd outlive us all. Her will and determination were second to none. But even Ellen couldn't master Mother Nature. I'd like to have been a fly on the wall at the pearly gates 2 days ago for the scene when Ellen arrived there. First of all, you know she arrived with a platter full of the best brownies St. Peter ever ate. And the conversation must have been something to marvel at. Whoever is in charge up there would know for sure who just arrived. But down here on earth, there's a hole, a big hole. Goodbye, Ellen. Goodbye, friend. Sleep peacefully, knowing that this is a better world for many, mostly people who didn't know you, because you were here and made a difference. Zichrona livracha, Ellen. Your memory is a blessing.
Let's pause for just a moment now for a few moments of quiet and private prayer. We pray in silence. May the words of our mouths and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. May Ellen's memory endure among us as a blessing. In your own time, O God, when we too are called to enter eternity, may we leave this life secure in the knowledge that in your light we shall see light. In life and in death we cannot go where you are not, and where you are, hope endures. Sustained by this assurance, we invoke your name, Almighty God. Friends, in just a moment, we're going to rise for the chanting of El Malei Rachamim, the Jewish memorial prayer on behalf of the deceased, asking for God to grant peace and rest and tranquility for those who have departed the earth. After the conclusion of the prayer, I'll invite you to take your seats once again so that the family and the rabbis can accompany the casket to the gravesite. You're all invited to join us for the burial at the gravesite. If you don't wish to join us, a reminder that you'll have the chance to offer prayers of memory at the Shiva Minyan this evening at 7 p.m. at Murray and Karen's home on Taylor Crest Road. The address is in your handouts. Also a reminder that Ellen's name will be read for the recitation of Kaddish this whole week at Congregation Emanu at our evening minyan at 6 p.m. and then again at this coming Shabbat's evening and morning services. So, with Ellen's name and memory in our hearts, we rise now for the recitation of El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim Shochen Bamromim Hamtzei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina Im Kedoshim Utehorim Kezohar Harakia Mazhirim Et Nishmat Yekiratenu Shehalcha Leolama Anna Balarachimim Yasireha Besetra Kenafav Leolamim Beitzror HaChaim Et Nishmata Adonai Hu Nachalata V'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava v'nomar Amen. Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Ellen Hurwitz-Penner, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let her find refuge in the shadow of your wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is her inheritance. May she rest in peace. And we say together, Amen. You may be seated.
I'd like to ask David Engler, a family member, would like to come up and share something with us before we depart.
My brother-in-law, Alan Lopatin, cannot be here today, but he was very distraught at hearing Ellen's death, and he wrote these words asking that I speak the death, and he wrote these words asking that I speak them. He wrote these words asking that I speak them here today. One of the joys of marrying into the Engler family is getting to know the in-laws, or mahutanitsa, as my sister-in-law Mirna likes to say. While I love all of my Engler clan, my cousin Ellen held a very special place in my heart, and I feel her loss and offer my condolences and prayers to Ellen's family and friends. Ellen was my buddy, mostly by long distance, what with our living in Washington, D.C., but she'd call on occasion to check in, and I delighted in those calls. Always a good story, and always a warm heart. Over the years, when Debbie and I made it to Houston for the many family celebrations, it never failed that Ellen would be my seatmate at the various events. I loved hearing and sharing details of our latest skirmish with our respective medical teams for our latest healthcare issues. I'll miss our chats. She was one of a kind, big-hearted lady who was always a presence for me. Whenever she came to Washington, she made it a point to include us in her plans. And when our son Jonah spent the summer in Houston deciding on a career path, Ellen set up poker night with her grandsons to make him feel at home. Ellen, I love you and will miss you. What a special prize you were for me in being an honorary Engler. On behalf of all the Mahutanitsa, thank you for touching our lives and making us feel a part of the family. Thank you.
Thank you, David. The family's asked me to inform you that there's a mistype in the program. The address for the meeting tonight is 11930, not the 11030, 11930 Taylor Crest. So please make that note either mentally or on a piece of paper so you remember. I'd like to ask you all now to remain at your seats. The rabbis and the family will precede you behind the coffin to the gravesite. Once we have reached the doors of the chapel, those of you who wish to follow, please do at that time.